Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and these are the topping B200 Monoblock speaker amplifiers. Yeah, speaker amplifiers from a guy who has done mostly headphone-based reviews. Apos Audio loaned me this pair of amplifiers. They cost $599 a piece. They are available in this black finish or a silver finish for the same price, I believe. These are a loan from Apos. They will be going back very soon. Apos has asked nothing in exchange other than a fair and honest evaluation of these amplifiers, which you are about to receive. The link where you can buy these amps down in the description below from Apos will be an affiliate link, so if you like what I have to say about these amps and you want to buy them, please consider using that affiliate link, and if you do, I will get a small kickback. That just helps me keep the channel running, though, and generally does not influence my opinion, but I will let you be the judge of that as the review unfolds. To sum up my takeaways here, what Topping has done with the B200 speaker amplifiers is that they have done for speaker amps what they have already done for headphone amps. Now, is that a good thing? Find out right after shameless self-promotion.
Hi, it's me again, 14 months later and a whole foot taller. Now, since Wave Theory liked the first 10,000 subscriber play button I made him, maybe he wants a 25,000 subscriber play button. This can only happen if you subscribe, though. Now, since over 60% of the watch time comes from unsubscribed viewers, I'm going to need you to subscribe. You can also sign up for his Patreon or send him money in PayPal. Links in the description. Now, on to the video.
Alright, let me set the stage for you a little bit here, because these being speaker amplifiers, there's definitely a chance that there will be new members of the audience who come from the two-channel crowd, and again, I have typically more catered to the headphone crowd in terms of my audio reviews. I am slowly expanding into the two-channel space, so if you are here as a two-channel fan and two-channel user, welcome, I am Wave Theory. I tend to get a little bit long-winded because I go into as much detail as I know how to do on my reviews, so they can get a little on the long side. So I will timestamp out this video. You can jump around and watch the parts that are of most interest and relevance to you, or go ahead and grab your beverage of choice, get comfortable, and let's talk about the Topping B200 speaker amplifiers. Okay. I also want to fill in some context for those of you who may not know. And if you are a long-time watcher of my channel, I'm about to go into some of my experience with Topping in the past to provide some context and just to declare potential biases and all of that kind of thing. If you've heard that before, go ahead and jump to the next timestamp. If you're new, I really strongly encourage you to stick around and listen to this, because it will help you understand where I'm coming from with this review. All right, so even though I am mostly a headphone and headphone system reviewer, I have listened to speakers and home theater gear for most of my life as well. So they are not unfamiliar products or product categories for me. It's just that in my reviewing efforts, because of life situations of living in apartments and that sort of thing for a good number of years in my young adult years, headphones just became a more natural way for me to enjoy music in a hi-fi way. Just because, again, life situation and all of that kind of stuff. I am slowly trying to expand into more speaker and hopefully home theater-based reviews and bulk up my experiences in terms of reviewing, not necessarily in terms of raw number of hours of listening to music over a lifetime. Okay, here as we go and get into that, that subset of the hobby as well. Okay, so that's one thing that you need to keep in mind here in terms of like my experience with speaker gear from a critical reviewing standpoint is not what it is for headphones. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Now let's talk my history with Topping here. I am not a stranger to Topping gear. I have reviewed, I don't know exactly what the number is, but it's got to be close to 10, at least, different Topping products that have been DACs or headphone amplifiers or combinations thereof. And my experience of them, just to put it mildly, has been less than positive. I am well aware that they are like some of the most beautifully measuring pieces of gear on the market, and that is Topping's ethos. They seem to set out to develop products that tickle audio precision measurement rigs in all of the right ways. Does that necessarily translate to good sound? To my ears, no. Okay, it has not, and I'll flesh that out here in just a moment. But that's also a bit of a spoiler for the review here, because when I say that these B200 amplifiers, that with these B200 amplifiers, Topping has done for speaker amps what they did for headphone amps, that's not necessarily a compliment. So let me just flesh that out just a little bit here, just to, again, to kind of help the new audience understand. I have found Topping's strengths, okay, to be that they are whisper quiet. They have a black void sonic background. Okay, so basically an absent noise floor, which is good. They are also very clean and clear sounding when the music is not particularly complicated. Okay, what does that mean? So here's one example. Pull up and listen to In the Hall of the Mountain King, which is a classical work. I prefer the Herbert von Karajan directed version, played by the Berlin Philharmonic from 1983. Excellent recording. But what I like about this track is it's just over 2 minutes long. It starts out rather simple. You just have like some string basses, like, you know, upright basses, okay, playing along this little melody. And you get little like violin, there might be plucks or anything like that to start out with. And then like it's rather quiet, right? It's fairly simple in its presentation there. Initially, you hear the room, you hear chairs creaking, somebody coughs, okay? But there's not a lot of sound going on in it initially. But then the full orchestra comes in, right? And it gets big and it gets loud in a hurry, and like the full symphony starts playing. So now you've got like 70 instruments, okay, all doing their thing, all simultaneously, right? There's a lot of sonic information going on in there. What I have noticed with Toppings is that in that first passage, that quiet passage, that simple, they sound great. I mean, they sound great, okay? Because of that quiet background, because of that clarity and cleanliness that they have, they sound wonderful in that opening passage on that track. But when the full symphony comes in, it all goes mushy really, really quick, okay? And I've heard this now on both headphones that I know are extremely resolving, like you see the Hi-Fi-Man Susvara unveiled behind me. There's also an original Hi-Fi-Man Susvara back there, okay, on really high-end gear and all of that. So, I mean, I know that the signal is strong. I know what it's supposed to sound like, and Topping DACs and amps have both kind of turned that busy passage into mush. Now, I think that is consistent with gear that has been so focused on passing simple sine waves beautifully that they focused on that and they just kind of lost in the shuffle what happens when you have tens of thousands of sine waves all stacked up on top of each other, when you've got all of the fundamentals from fundamental frequencies and their harmonics from 70 instruments going on all at once, okay? So that's just one of my complaints. They also tend to roll off in the deep bass and just generally not be very dynamic or impactful to my ears relative to their similarly priced competition. Okay. So there we go. That's my history with Topping. And so that's the context that I come into the B200 with. So just keep all of that in mind. Now, about the B200s themselves. So $600 a piece, 2 color options, and they are quite powerful. They are rated at 200 watts into an 8 ohm load with less than 1% total harmonic distortion plus noise. That's pretty good power output. Now, they have basically the same power output into a 4 ohm load, which already to me starts to indicate that the power supply on them may not be quite what it should be. And I have the power supplies here a little bit off screen. Let me hold them up. You get these outboard power bricks with this amplifier here. That is the power supply. They are between 100 volt, they are 60 volt 4 amp power supplies. there. So, I mean, they are fairly beefy-ish, but they don't provide the extra juice that a 4 ohm load output to increase the power output into 4 ohm loads would generally need. Now, you still get 200 watts, so does that really matter? Probably not. It's just something to be aware of. You also see that, like, from a build standpoint, they are very simplistic. It's just a pure gray gray panel here. You see that there are 3 indicators for inputs. There are 3 inputs here, and then you have this power and select button here. All that. The back panel is also not particularly busy. You see the speaker binding post. You see where the power supply connects here. You have gain control of high-low. You've got 12-volt trigger. And then you have 3 inputs here that are all just balanced. Okay, XLR, although it will accept a 1/4 inch, but I believe they have to be TRS balanced connectors there. No single-ended input, which is an odd choice to not have that at all, but it's just a reality that you're going to have to be aware of if you want to buy this amplifier. So that's one of the ergonomic things to keep in mind. All right, so that's it. That's the feature list. I will say that I did find that even when you plug these in and power them on, go to power them on, if they've been unplugged for a while, it takes the power supply a few seconds to kind of like reach the level where these will actually turn on. Okay, not a big deal. Just something to be aware of there as well. Okay, and then of course you want to make sure that you have the correct input selected. If you're using multiple inputs on these things, you're going to have to change the input selector on both of them for a stereo pair to work. Okay, all right, so another ergonomic thing to keep in mind there. You really are better served getting a preamp or using a DAC that has a variable output level to connect to these and handle the source switching side of it there. Topping recommends their own D90 Mark III to do that. I have several DACs and preamps around. So let's start transitioning to that sound that I'm talking about, and let me list some of my test gear, okay, on that I used for this. So all digital music listener, so everything would have started as either a lossless or high-res FLAC file or a DSD file played locally over Roon. In the case of FLAC files, they could have also been streamed from Qobuz, again through Roon. All right, the primaries, my 2-channel setup right now has gone through a couple of iterations since this has been here. Because of the only balanced inputs on this, the system I rigged up to listen to this involved, as a Roon endpoint, a Sonor Ultra Rendu, which was then connected direct USB to a live Harmony DAC, which in turn was connected via its XLR outputs into the matching Harmony HP2A headphone amp and preamplifier. Then the preamp outputs, the XLR preamp outputs of that Harmony amplifier went into the B200s. There were 2 sets of speakers that I used to do evaluations here. One of them was the ELAC Unify UB52, and the other is a pair of Martin Logan Motion B20s, which are in for review. Hopefully that will be out in the near future. Okay. Sonically, so I also tried a couple of other DACs there, because like the live Harmony stack, while the preamp output of the HP2A I don't believe has this problem, the DAC certainly is known for having an odd output impedance. So I also tried Topping's Centaurus DAC, which is also in for review, and I just published that review, see link down in the description, and then connected that via XLR outputs into these as well. That has a volume control on it, so I used it as a preamp using the same Sonor Ultra Rendu as a source USB input on the Centaurus. Okay. What I learned here is that the topping, the strengths of Topping's house sound with, it made it in here. Whisper quiet, black void sonic background, cleanliness and clarity for days here on the sound. Okay? Those are the strengths. The weaknesses also came out. Kind of a mushy, spatial presentation, a small soundstage, which was very odd and interesting, and I will explain that in a little bit further detail. Dynamics that are okay, but not class leading. A bit of a rolled off sub bass. Okay, and generally just a not particularly engaging sound, to be quite frank with you. So let's unpack those things a little bit. Generally speaking, you're going to get a very neutral presentation on these with a little bit of sub bass roll off. Just like their headphone amps, you get below about 50 hertz and the bass energy really dissipates quickly. It seems to roll off. This will not show up in a frequency response plot. It does show up by ear. You get a track like Mountains by Hans Zimmer where you have this descending bass line that goes really, really deep. The lower registers of that, those descending bass lines on that track, just die out quicker on a topping amp than other amps that I have heard. Okay, that is a consistent thing that made it in here as well. Other than that, lots of neutrality to the tone, fairly realistic balance between fundamental frequencies and their harmonics. Okay, and again, super quiet, super clean, no noise coming out of this thing. If there's noise coming from your speakers on there, it's probably upstream from your source gear going into this, not from this amplifier itself. Okay, so that is a strength as well. And again, it is very clean and clear when the music is simpler. Okay, that kind of thing happened in here too. All right. Now, let me talk about that soundstage because this was the most immediate thing that I noticed. For some context, like my main speaker amplifier is kind of a vintage amp. It's an Adcom GFA 555 Mark II. Okay, and that's a single-ended amp, so I've been using a Chord Hugo 2 with matching 2Go streamer as the source for that. And then the Hugo 2 has volume control on it, so just use it as a preamp there as well. And so that's the system I'm most familiar with listening to. And then also, Live very graciously sent me their Harmony GANM amplifiers, their new GANFET monoblocks. And so I've been listening to those a little bit too. And I had the GANMs set up. And then when these arrived, I unboxed them, swapped them out with the GANMs to make sure they were working. And it's like the thing that jumped out at me immediately was just how much smaller the stage was and how much like just less sound there seemed to be. Like even when it played very loudly and we got volume match there, it's like all of the sonic detail was like compressed towards the center. Okay, so the soundstage strangely sounded smaller to me than the distance between the speakers. And then it got even weirder when like there would be a hard pan, like there would be a guitar or something hard panned to one side. You'd hear like left channel, there was guitar coming out of it, then space, and then this kind of ball around the center image. And then likewise, if there's something hard panned on the right channel, same kind of thing would happen. So then with hard pans, it would be like, okay, now those hard pan sounds are jumping outside of the soundstage. Very odd. Okay. Yes, I checked my phasing. I made sure that like right was going to right and positive was going to positive and all of those kinds of stuff. That kind of stuff wasn't an issue there. And I've not heard that on any other speaker amp that I've had come through here. So it wasn't a speaker placement thing. It wasn't a room problem or anything like that because no other amps. And there have been about a half a dozen speaker amps that I've tried here in this room, okay, where I am with that. Just not an issue. That just never happened. Okay, so it's definitely these amps that were doing it. And it did it regardless of whether I was using the Live Harmony stack as source gear or the topping Centaurus, okay, on its own. The phenomenon happened on both. So I gotta say that it's the amps that are doing it there. Okay. So that was thing number one there. And so like I do a lot of comparisons for a review on this channel. And so, I mean, I mentioned the GANM in there from Live. Much more expensive than these. I wouldn't expect these to compete with that. So we're not going to worry about that. It doesn't. We're not going to worry about that. I have still because it was also on loan from Apos, and I hung on to it so I could do the comparison with these. The SMSL PAX stereo speaker amplifier, another one of those GANFET speaker amps out there. right now and plug that in. It's a stereo amp, also rated 200 watts per channel and all of that. It does not measure nearly as well as the B200s do, okay? But sonically, it is, to me, the far superior amp, unfortunately. And the problem is it basically has the same price as one of these topping amplifiers here. The SMSL had more bass presence when I was running speakers full range. There was more authority in the low end. It had a more fleshed out and full sound stage that actually sounded bigger than the distance between the speakers, where this to me clearly sounded smaller, and it just had a more engaging dynamics and just a more fun, enjoyable, and frankly lifelike sound to it in there. So I'm going to go ahead and end this review. I said I get long-winded. I don't really need to, because all I'm going to end up doing here is belaboring the point that I'm sorry to Topping, I'm sorry to Apos, and I'm sorry to everyone out there that is in love with these, because there apparently are people out there who do so. I don't hear it. I don't get it. Okay? Something is up with these. If all you are worried about is clean, clear, and you're not worried about soundstage or anything like that, okay, great. Here you go. But in terms of listening enjoyment, I think you can find much better experiences than this for far less money. And I think I just need to go ahead and end the review there before I get just into too negative and angry territory, frankly. So that's what I'm going to do. So thanks to all of you for watching. Welcome to the new audience segment. I'm not always negative, but I am negative when I need to be. Okay, and in this case, I need to be. All right, so thanks again for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe, comment, check out my PayPal, my Patreon. Become a channel member, do those things you generally do to support YouTube channels, and as always, enjoy the music.